Our communities need healing.
And post-COVID, that will take a long time.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here is your host and moderator.
Welcome, viewers. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have an interesting program ahead, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. But before we get there, let's meet our panelists.
Hi, I'm Tom Plumbley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and I serve as the senior minister at First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas.
My name is Rabbi Dan Levin. I serve as senior rabbi of Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
Hi, I'm Carl Troval. I'm professor of ethics and history at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
Hi, I'm Tony Matthews, and I'm the senior pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
And I am Andrea LUXTON. I'm the president of Andrews University of Michigan, and I am today's moderator. And we are now going to hear the statement for today. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown our communities and our nation the huge danger to all of us of polarized opinions. We have seen our families, our faith communities, our wider communities, and our nation turn against each other with anger, selfishness, and fear. Accusations have often replaced thoughtful conversations, and hostility has sadly muted the voice of compassion and care for each other. While this has been caused most immediately by the pandemic, these deep tensions have spread in the community to other issues also. Now, as individuals look towards the future and the real possibility of the pandemic ending and/or COVID becoming endemic, the question remains, how do we heal? When the physical illness has largely passed and our lives largely returned to normality, how do we heal as faith communities from the divisiveness? How do we help our families, our communities, and our nation move past recriminations, hurt, and anger to find a place of healing and peace emotionally and spiritually? And can that happen for other points of tension too? The panel is asked today to consider at least the three following questions. Firstly, what divisions are you seeing around you, and what do you think is the main catalyst for this fragmentation of our communities? Secondly, have you seen any examples of community healing happening? What was it that made it work? And finally, what suggestions do you have for our viewers and our wider faith communities to help each other become a peacemaker and together be part of a community that heals? We're going to start by going back to our panelists who began our program today.
It's good being here, and I think this is a great topic, the need to heal. And COVID obviously has been a significant, serious, and in some contexts, a severe phenomenon. The pandemic is real. What I have seen over the last couple of years have been, in part, heartbreaking. The relationships that have been severed. I often refer to this whole COVID situation as having COVID casualties, and not just with people dying. Relationships have, we've seen the death of relationships, the death of mental stability in a lot of people's lives. We've had fights over people wearing masks versus not wearing masks. People getting the vaccine versus them not getting the vaccine. And I think one thing that has made it a little tougher for regular everyday people like myself is when we see scientists who are just, brilliant folks fighting and arguing with other scientists. And of course we understand that there could be some, varied views on the nature of COVID and how to, combat it. But when we see these folks on television being pitted against each other and they're arguing and fighting, it breeds a certain amount of confusion in the minds of everyday people. Doctors fighting with each other. And then when we politicize, in my opinion, the pandemic, I think that is another challenge that we've had, and it has caused a lot of problems just politicizing it. In the local church, I think, we've seen an uptick in anxiety, depression. We've seen communities just hurt and harmed, and particularly in the Black community. Early on, we were hit pretty hard, and we had a lot of people dying. And I'm not trying to make light of any other ethnicity and race. We don't want anyone to die, but the Black community was hit pretty hard. And I think when we, was it 100 years ago when we had a pandemic before? Was it about 100 years ago? A lot of folks say, well, 100 years ago, we had a pandemic. Why can't we, solve the problem now? Well, wow, 100 years ago, so it's 100 years ago. And for one thing, we didn't have the information highway that we have now. I mean, the internet is just full of truth in certain areas, and then it's full of falsehoods in other areas. And people are reading. We have so many conspiracy theories out there. I think also with the vaccine being rolled out with at the speed that it came out, I think that in the minds of certain people, they just don't trust it. So we have a lot of division. COVID has brought in a lot of division, and we need healing. I think we need healing. Now, one interesting thing that we noticed with the church is that a lot of my white pastor friends and non-Black pastor friends, white in particular, and the gathering, the in-person gathering, they didn't stay out real long, just by and large. They went back. A lot of my Black pastor friends, they stayed out for a pretty good while. So that we're seeing something very interesting there. And I hope we can talk about that with this program to see the different mindsets and how that has impacted us. But we need healing. And again, COVID has really, wreaked havoc in so many quarters.
Thank you.
All right, but I got to throw a question at you because you laid it down, but I mean, I'd really like to, what's your theory about that? About why white pastors and Black pastors approach it differently? Do you have a... Carl,
I think a lot of my white pastor friends basically approach this like, okay, we have the virus, it's out there, and we'll mask up, we'll do what we can do, but we're going to go ahead and gather. We're not going to stay home. Now, a lot of white churches did shut down, but there are some that took off 2 or 3 weeks and then they went right back, they gathered. And so I think it's, and it might be, and I want to emphasize that, it might be the whole area of fear. Maybe there's a little bit more fear within the Black community because of, prior history. Sure. And we, like I said, we were hit pretty hard with the, with people dying. But that it's just an interesting thing, and I have current conversations about the distinction between the white church and the Black church and COVID, and why they went back a lot earlier than some of us.
Well, because I think that this is why I think this is going to take a long time in healing. Like a scar, I don't know that it's ever going to go away, and it may even be sensitive to the touch for a lot of the reasons that you expressed. I mean, I think there is a racial component that I don't know that we fully understand what that means exactly. I think you've touched on a lot of the ongoing mutations of the virus are another reason why I think it's going to take a long time. You mentioned making the issue political. I'm not even going to try. Yeah. But I agree that unfortunately, what would be there was no political controversy over polio vaccines, but over this, for a lot of reasons, it's now become politicized. Oh, I said it. And yeah. Well, I mean, the funny thing is, too, is that, I mean, the economic, I thought maybe this is a lot of just economic stress, which it is. I mean, a lot, and it's still residual. That's why it's going to take a long time. But I thought, oh, once we get the economy kind of back rolling and roaring, you know, this is going to really ease out. And it looks like the divisions continue despite the economic recovery. And what I'm saying is that I think we have a lot of work to do as a culture, particularly in talking to one another and figuring out, like, how can we talk to one another and not get into an argument? I mean, one personal anecdote, and I'm going to end, and that is this family stuff. My son's getting married, and he and his fiancée decided that because of the vulnerability of certain people at the wedding, they said, if you're not vaccinated, we ask you not to come. We would love to have you here. And it was like, they spent so many hours stressing out over that, and I don't blame them. It was, I admire them in one way, and I go, man, it's a tough call in the other.
So when I look to the book of Exodus, when the Israelites cross and the journey begins, there's a lot of discord. And I think it's because there was life and death stuff that had to be addressed. They didn't have enough food. They didn't have enough water. In fact, if we look at Exodus 17, what is the name of the place where they struggle and argue about water? They call it Masau Meribah, meaning quarreling and striving. Right? Because when issues of life or death come up, the communities get afraid and they break apart. And I think we saw that during COVID when people's choices were not just seen as, all right, well, you wore pink and I wore blue. It was, your choice could kill me. Or your choice could assault who I think I really am at my core. And when identity issues, and I think our politicians, unfortunately, because of the divisiveness in our society, played up all of that discord and made it much worse than it needed to be, there really couldn't be healing. It was only when they got to Mount Sinai and those life or death things had kind of been resolved that the Israelites could kind of come together with each other. And I wonder if there's maybe a model for us to look at when we look at our society. But what I really wish wouldn't have happened would be for people to have lost the ideal of common cause in fighting this illness, so that you saw the rupture of families and friendships and relationships and communities over something that would seem to be as basic as questions of public health.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the pandemic, as bad as it is, simply lies within or underneath a larger umbrella of a bigger pandemic, and that's a pandemic of disinformation. Because one of the things that has kept us divided, one of the things that has caused us to lose that sense of the common cause, is that we have so much disinformation out there, and I'm not talking about misinformation. Misinformation is unintended. It's casual. It's something that happens all the time simply because we make mistakes. Disinformation is intentional. Disinformation is lying, and there is so much of that out there. And to use the word that you were searching for, politicization, it has to do with the fact that we've politicized everything, but particularly these important steps that we need to take to get rid of this thing, to guard ourselves in the first place, and to keep ourselves distanced from each other, and then to get rid of the bug, to keep it from mutating, and when we can't even agree what truth is, we can't even agree on who we should listen to. Tony, you mentioned the fact that we see scientists arguing with each other. I think there's some false equivalence going on in that scientific debate, because there's this huge. It's sort of like climate change, the climate change issue. There's this huge pot of information and number of scientists who say this is the reality, and then you got a few people who happen to have MD or PhD in front of their name that for some reason don't believe it, and you call that a scientific argument. Same with COVID. There's all this information about what the reality is of how this thing spreads and how we need to get rid of it, and then you've got a few people who stand up and with lab coats on and pretend to tell us the way that we should go. There's false equivalence about the information that is garnered, that is put out there in that sort of conversation.
So is there hope?
Well, I think there is hope, except I think that the problem is that we've become so tribal that we are much more interested in vanquishing our opponent than we are in coming together. Mm-hmm. You know, one of the things that I see in some areas, right, like somebody who was a prominent anti-vaxxer comes down with COVID and dies, and you hear some people saying, oh, serves her right. What a horrible thing to say. Right. And when something is disproven, right, you have people on the right saying, see, those libs, ha, 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 right? So I think that we've gotten to a place in our society where we are more interested in vanquishing our opponent than we are in healing the wounds of our society. And so long as we're more interested in winning and more interested in vanquishing the other side, I think we're going to have a long time coming, as you said, Carl, to find a path to healing. But I agree with you, Tony, that is a path we have to find.
I think also that we need to display great humility. I'm not a scientist, you know, I've lived with COVID just like everyone else has, but to me it seems like we just don't know. We don't know how this is spreading. It's a lot of things we don't know. I know folks who have masked up, they've got vaccines and boosted, they're staying away from people, they still got COVID. Then I have some friends, you know, they didn't wear the mask and then they don't get COVID. So I think at some point we have to humble ourselves and cry out to the Lord, you know, and say, hey, we really don't know everything. Help us to do the right thing, you know, by our brothers and sisters in society.
I wanted to say also, I think it's about also in the sense of coming together. I remember having a conversation with a woman who she was not going to get the vaccine, and I was like, why are you not going to get the vaccine, just out of curiosity? And she says, well, I'm kind of embarrassed to talk about it. And I said, well, you don't have to if you don't want to. But she ended up sharing just her medical situation. And I said, well, I want to affirm that. I said, I teach medical ethics. I said, the first principle of medical ethics is like your autonomy. You have the right of no one can control what you're doing with your body. And so that's a fundamental principle. So I said, I think the other side is that you have to realize there are risks to both sides of both taking the vaccine and not taking it, and individuals have to weigh that out. My only point is that I think sometimes we just need to affirm that some people are actually standing on a solid ethical principle. Whether I agree with their application of that in their situation, I may disagree, but still I need to affirm that, and that's at least some common ground to begin talking.
Great. Okay, thank you. Let's take a break.
Oh my, is it time for a break?
We hope you're enjoying today's program. If you'd like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the vision and history of the program, and we invite you to become a ministry partner, explore our Town Hall Estates healthcare facilities, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, we look forward to receiving your letters. You may write us at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. If you have a prayer request, please send it to prayerrequest@americanreligious.org. Thank you for writing and thank you for watching. Now, back to today's closing statements.
Welcome back. A topic today that impacts all of us and not an easy answer. But our viewers have had a good go at the problem. And we're going to move now to the closing comments. So.
Thank you. In thinking about how we heal in the midst of such division, we have to realize that emotions and diverging interests and conflicting values and value systems even intermingle. But they intermingle with evidence. There are facts out there. So part of the antidote of our division, part of the way we heal is to gain good information and to share good information and to explain how disinformation works. But then on an even more basic level, we have to remember that we got to listen to each other. And also, I think it must be said at this point in time that we cannot resort to violence and we should not resort to turning away from each other, but rather we must engage.
Yeah. The second question, have you seen examples of community healing? I don't know about healing, but I think something that's facilitated healing at our university has been a kind of clear line that was established early on, that we're going to do, this is what's going to happen when we're at this stage. This is what's going to happen when we're at this stage. This is what's going to happen at this stage. And you know what? Maybe not everybody was happy with the decisions, but the administration has stuck to those levels about when we wear masks, when we don't, the social distance, all of that. And so the easing has come slowly, maybe slower than some people want. But my point is that I think because even though it's an artificial state, it isn't artificial, it was a standard established by the health department. Because Concordia just decided to follow it, everyone's willing to say, okay, we're gonna stay unified as a community by following those rules, even if we personally don't care for it. And I think that's helped us live together, even though we disagree with one another at Concordia.
And similar to that, I think, if we can respect one another, our decisions, and just let folks know, okay, I want to wear a mask, but if you're not going to wear a mask, I respect that, and we move on. We pray for each other. I think, the country, we need to pray for one another. And we certainly need to do what's best for ourselves. There are people with medical issues, and we just need to not be so quick on the draw. And I also think that even with COVID, and I try to live by this, I don't do a good job all the time, but I try to look for silver linings even in the worst of things, and that's hard to do sometimes. And COVID, the silver linings. Wow, one thing we see is that our country is resilient. It is, good grief, we've nearly shut the whole thing down, and we had a lot of deaths, a lot of challenges, but we're still here, and we are stronger, I believe. And also, when it comes to the church, one of the silver linings with COVID that I recognize is so many of us had to go online with media overnight, and I see that as, wow, the gospel is being presented, in places where it would not have been, without COVID. And I know some people may not take that approach, but for me to survive, I have to look at, silver linings as well.
So in the Talmud, there's a famous passage that says there was 3 years of dispute between the teachings of Hillel and the teaching of Shammai, and then a heavenly voice came out and said, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. These words and those words are the words of the living God. But the law goes according to Hillel. They said, well, why does the law go according to Hillel if they're both the words of the living God? And they said it was because Hillel was humble. And it was because Hillel didn't just teach his teachings, he also taught the teachings of Shammai. And in fact, he taught the teachings of Shammai before he taught his own teachings. So the law doesn't go according to Hillel because he was smarter or because he was more in tune with what God wanted. It was because he was more healing. And I think that if we can learn to try to teach what others are trying to understand and to have that kind of humility, we'll be in a stronger place as a society.
Thank you. Thank you all for your excellent comments today. It seems to me, in the university where I am too, what we established very early on was what we called a covenant of care, and expected every student and employee to support that. And that covenant of care was basically our responsibility for the community, our responsibility for others. So it seems to me that even if we have different views on this or different views on that, our responsibility of care means that we look beyond our opinion, our needs, and reach out to others. And it seems that also is very important as we look at what this whole healing thing means. To our viewers, thank you again for joining us today. And please remember that we love to hear from you at any time. Please contact us. Please send us your thoughts, your ideas, your recommendations. If you have something you'd like to pray for, please let us know. We would love to be a part of that prayer, as part of your prayer life as well. As we conclude today, please remember us and our communities, where we come from, and are trying to help heal too. The Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestant, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And so now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.